I want to start with a picture. Just look at the world map in your head. For the last, 80 years,
At least, yeah.
there's been this massive gravitational pull right in the center, the United States. It's been the economic sun that, every other nation orbits.
It's the setup we all grew up with. I mean,
Yeah.
if you wanted to trade, you used dollars. If you wanted to innovate, you went to Silicon Valley.
If you needed security, you called Washington. Exactly. But we have a stack of reports on the desk today. Internal notes on European financial panic, breaking news on a Canada-China trade deal that honestly feels like a fever dream,
It really does.
and some heavy analysis from the World Economic Forum and Paul Krugman. And they all point to one pretty unsettling conclusion. That sun might be flickering out. Or maybe the other planets are trying to find a new orbit.
It's a bold claim, I know.
Yeah.
But when you actually look at the raw data from early 2026, the global economy isn't just drifting. It is actively restructuring itself to function without the United States.
And that is our mission today. We are asking, is the world actually filing for divorce from America? And if they are, does it matter to you? Does it change the price of your groceries or the interest rate on your credit card?
Spoiler alert,
Yeah.
it does. This isn't just, high-level diplomacy. This is about the plumbing of the global financial system. And right now, the plumbing is leaking.
Okay, let's get into the sources. I want to start with what these European internal memos are calling the Greenland moment.
It does sound like a spy novel title, doesn't it?
It really does.
But it's actually a reference to a very specific geopolitical headache. I mean, we're all familiar with the friction between the U.S. and Europe lately. You've had President Trump's recurring interest in acquiring Greenland.
Which he's mentioned might require force.
Right. And then you have the seizure of Venezuelan oil assets.
Which, regardless of your politics, sends a pretty loud signal to the rest of the world. We take what we want.
It signals unpredictability. And for a continent like Europe, which prizes stability above all else, that is terrifying. French President Emmanuel Macron has been really vocal about this. He's warning that Europe is currently way too vulnerable to U.S. coercion. And that is the Greenland moment.
The realization that your sovereignty is conditional on America's mood.
Exactly.
But hang on, when we talk about coercion, usually we mean tanks or tariffs. But these reports, they're highlighting something way more invisible. They're talking about cloud computing.
This is the hidden layer of power. I mean, think about it. How does the modern European economy function? Who hosts the data for French hospitals? Who manages the cloud servers for German banks?
Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud.
Precisely. And then look at the financial rails. So you buy a croissant in Paris. Chances are Visa or MasterCard is processing that payment. Nearly 2/3 of all Eurozone transactions go through American companies.
Okay, but isn't that just globalization? Why is that suddenly a threat?
Because those services can be turned off. And this isn't hypothetical anymore. We have a specific case study in the stack about the International Criminal Court, the ICC.
Right. This was the investigation into potential war crimes in Gaza.
So the ICC launched the investigation. The U.S. administration wasn't happy and imposed sanctions. But look at how those sanctions hit. It wasn't just frozen assets. Judges and prosecutors at the ICC in The Hague suddenly found their credit cards stopped working.
Wow.
They couldn't buy lunch.
That's wild. But it gets even more dystopian, doesn't it?
It does. Microsoft had to comply with the executive order, so they turned off the chief prosecutor's email account.
They turned off her email.
Gone. Imagine that.
Yeah.
You are a high-level international lawyer, and suddenly you are digitally erased because a foreign government signed a piece of paper.
That is the aha moment. If
Right.
they can do it to the ICC, they can do it to the European Central Bank.
And that is exactly what Christine Lagarde, the president of the ECB, is saying. We have a quote from her here. She admits they realize they are not effectively sovereign in our own garden. I mean, what humiliating realization for a superpower bloc like the EU.
So what's the move? Do they just, build their own internet?
They're trying. This is the big push for digital sovereignty. You see the development of a digital euro, basically state-backed crypto that bypasses Visa and MasterCard. You see the French government ordering state workers to stop using Zoom and switch to something called Visio.
Visio. Never heard of it. Is it any good?
Well, that's the problem. The sources are pretty blunt here. Europe is playing catch-up. They currently import 80% of their digital technology.
Okay.
And when you look at AI, the gap is even wider. One report called it a computational chasm.
So they want to leave the American house, but they haven't built their own roof yet?
That's a really good way to put it. The political will is there to break up, but the technical reality is they're still sleeping on the couch.
Okay, so Europe is stuck in this anxious limbo. But let's spin the globe and look at North America. Because if Europe is anxious, Canada seems to be getting, well, bold.
Bold is one word for it. Ruthlessly pragmatic might be another. We're looking at Prime Minister Mark Carney's new foreign policy stance. He has this mantra: we take the world as it is, not as we wish it to be.
Which feels like a nice way of saying we can't trust our neighbors anymore.
It's a pivot, a huge one. Canada just struck a massive trade deal with China. And we really have to pause on this because contextually this is just bizarre. Canada has spent the last few years calling China a security threat.
Right. I remember the headlines about election interference, spy balloons, all of it. So why suddenly jump into bed with them?
Economics. The deal is stark. Canada is slashing tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. They were at 100%, basically a ban. They're dropping them to 6.1% for the first 49,000 cars.
That is a staggering drop. 100% to 6, that just floods the market with cheap EVs. What could Canada possibly get in return that's worth hurting their own auto industry?
Access for their farmers. China is cutting tariffs on Canadian canola, peas, and lobsters. Plus, they're removing visa requirements for Canadians.
So, we're trading high-tech electric cars for lobsters and peas.
It sounds funny, but if you're a farmer in Saskatchewan who's been crushed by Chinese tariffs for years, this is a lifeline. They love this deal.
But if you're in Ontario...
Oh, if you're Doug Ford, the premier of Ontario,
Right.
where all the auto plants are, you are screaming bloody murder. He's terrified. This just destroys the local manufacturing base.
But I have to ask the obvious question here. Canada's economy is practically glued to the U.S.? The USMCA, the free trade agreement, that's the holy grail for them.
Yeah.
Isn't this deal a slap in the face to Washington? Why risk it?
Because the USMCA is under mandatory review, and President Trump has already called it irrelevant. The Canadian calculations that the U.S. is no longer a reliable partner. Carney actually said that relations with China are more predictable than relations with the current U.S. administration.
Ouch. That has to sting.
It's a massive shift in alliance.
Yeah.
But here's the twist that really surprised me in the reports. You'd expect Trump to be furious about a Canada-China pact right on his border.
I assumed he'd be threatening tariffs immediately.
He didn't. He called it a good thing.
Wait, really?
He said, and this is a quote, "If you can get a deal with China, you should do that." He even suggested he's open to China building plants inside the U.S. if they hire American workers.
That is so confusing. One minute it's China's the enemy, the next it's good job on the deal.
It's the transactional worldview.
Yeah.
He doesn't see an alliance system. He sees a series of business deals. If Canada gets a good deal, fine. If the U.S. can get a factory, fine. But that exact attitude is what's causing the rest of the world to build structures that don't include the U.S.
And that leads us to the heavy hitter in our stack today. We've talked about Canada pivoting, but there's a much bigger realignment happening across the Atlantic. This, mother of all deals between the EU and India.
This is where we need to dig in, because this isn't just about trading lobsters. This is about rewriting the global economic map. We've got an op-ed from Paul Krugman from late January analyzing this.
And Krugman is usually pretty skeptical of these big proclamations.
He is, but he looks at the data here, and he sees a genuine economic divorce from the U.S. Think about the puzzle pieces. You have Europe, rich, aging population, high-end manufacturing, lots of capital, but they lack a young workforce.
And then you have India.
Youngest workforce in the world, massive population, desperate for technology and investment to build out their infrastructure.
They fit together like a zipper.
Exactly. They are perfectly complementary. Europe needs a place to make things and sell things that isn't China and isn't the U.S. India needs a partner that has tech and money, but isn't trying to act like a hegemon. Ursula von der Leyen called it the mother of all deals for a reason.
But why does this hurt the U.S.? Can't we just trade with both of them?
We can, but the leverage is gone. Krugman drops a statistic here that I think most Americans just don't realize. We tend to think the world creates goods just to sell them to us. We think we are the buyer of last resort.
Right. The American consumer is the engine of the world.
Not anymore. For most countries today, exports to the United States account for less than 5% of their GDP.
Less than 5%. That seems incredibly low.
It's the reality. So if the U.S. threatens, do what we say or we cut off trade, most countries could look at the math and say, okay, that hurts, but it's only 4% of our economy. We'll survive. We have Europe, we have India.
So the threat of sanctions, which is the big stick the U.S. waves around, is becoming a twig.
And corporations see this. This isn't just government talk. Look at Volkswagen and Audi.
Sure.
They just halted plans for a massive U.S. battery plant. Why? because the tariffs and the uncertainty made it unprofitable. They're
Hmm.
taking that money and moving it elsewhere.
And the talent is leaving too. The reports mention tech workers using the new H-1B visa rules as a reason to exit the U.S. and head back to India or Europe.
It's a brain drain and a capital drain simultaneously.
Huh.
German investment in China just hit a 4-year high. The money is flowing to where the stability is, and right now, that is not the United States.
Okay, so we've established that the trade routes are being redrawn, but there's one thing that always trumped everything else. The ultimate trump card, pun intended, the U.S. dollar.
The exorbitant privilege.
Right. Even if you hate U.S. policy, you hold U.S. dollars because it's the only safe asset. But you're telling me even that is shaking.
It is. And this is the part of the deep dive where we need to be really precise, because the mechanism here is, well, it's frightening. A reserve currency isn't magic. It's built on trust. And it stands on 3 pillars: macroeconomic stability, the rule of law, and independence of the central bank.
And looking at our scorecard.
It's bad. U.S. debt is exploding, so stability is questionable. The rule of law is taking a hit because of the weaponization we talked about, freezing assets, sanctions. And the Federal Reserve is under immense political pressure to cut rates, which undermines its independence.
But I always hear the counter-argument. There is no alternative.
Right.
You can't put your billions in the euro because Europe is a mess politically. You can't put it in China because the yuan is controlled by the state. You can't put it in gold because the market's too small.
And that has been true for decades. It's the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry theory. But there is a new wild card in 2026 that wasn't there before. Crypto. Specifically, stablecoins.
Explain this connection, because usually when we talk crypto, we're talking about speculation. How does that threaten the dollar?
It's about what backs the stablecoins. These coins, like Tether or USDC, are pegged to the dollar. To maintain that peg, they hold massive amounts of U.S. treasuries, billions upon billions of dollars of U.S. government debt.
Okay, so they're buying our debt. Isn't that a good thing?
Until it isn't. The World Economic Forum report outlines what they call a financial tsunami scenario. Imagine a panic in the crypto market. Maybe a regulation hits or a platform fails. These stablecoin issuers face a run on the bank. People want their money out.
So they have to sell assets to pay people back.
Right. They have to sell those U.S. treasuries fast. And not just a few million. We're talking dumping tens of billions of dollars of U.S. debt onto the market in a single afternoon.
And if everyone is selling?
The price of the bonds crashes. When bond prices crash, the yield, the interest rate spikes.
And this is the part I want to make sure we get. When that yield spikes, it doesn't just hurt Wall Street.
No, it hurts you immediately. Mortgage rates are tied to those yields. Car loans, credit cards, business loans. If stablecoins crash, the borrowing cost for the average American could double overnight. The housing market freezes. Businesses can't make payroll.
So the U.S. economy is now tied to the stability of the crypto market. That seems incredibly fragile.
It creates a liquidity crisis where there is nowhere to run. And in that chaos, the world doesn't just switch to the euro, it splinters.
Fragmentation.
Exactly. We move into rival blocks. You have a dollar block, a euro block, a yuan block, and money doesn't flow freely between them. It becomes weaponized finance. If you're in the U.S. block, you can't invest in the China block.
Which means everything gets more expensive.
Efficiency dies, prices go up, innovation slows down because ideas can't cross borders. It makes everyone, everywhere, poorer.
This is a lot to process. We started with Greenland and ended up with a financial crisis triggered by crypto. Let's just try to pull this together for the listener.
Sure.
We are seeing a pattern. Europe is scared of U.S. overreach, so they're trying to build digital walls. Canada is tired of U.S. unpredictability, so they're trading with a former adversary. India and Europe are realizing they don't need the U.S. middleman anymore.
And underneath it all, the financial foundation, the dollar, is cracking under the weight of debt and politics.
So if I'm listening to this on my commute, why does this matter to me personally, aside from the mortgage rates we just mentioned?
It matters because the American standard of living has been subsidized by the world's demand for dollars. If that demand goes away, imports get more expensive. Your phone, your clothes, your coffee prices go up.
Supply chains?
Disrupted. We saw it in COVID, but this would be permanent. If trade wars become the norm, you can't count on getting parts or products on time.
And job security.
If the U.S. is no longer the center of the world, global companies won't feel the need to hire here. The talent war moves to Bangalore or Berlin.
It feels like we're watching the end of an era in real time, the era of the indispensable nation.
I think that's accurate, but I want to be clear. This isn't inevitable chaos. It's a choice. The sources end on a really provocative thought.
Yes, I circled that too.
The question isn't whether America keeps its exorbitant privilege. That is already slipping. The question is whether the world can avoid a financial system built entirely on distrust.
Are we heading for a new kind of cooperation among equals, or are we heading for walled gardens and economic trench warfare?
Right now, looking at the Canada deal and the digital euro, it looks a lot like trench warfare. But policy can change.
Well, that is a heavy note to end on, but a necessary one. We can't navigate the world if we're using an outdated map.
Exactly. Better to know the storm is coming than to be surprised by the rain.
To our listener, take a look at your own economic sovereignty. Where is your company's next big project? Where is your retirement fund invested? The world is shifting under our feet, and it might be time to adjust your stance.